All right, so here we go. Hi, everyone. Happy Earth Day again. Very exciting time. The sun is out. The weather here in Teaneck is staying like around mid to high 70s. So it's been really nice. I went for a walk today and I just had on my shirt. I was showing off my tie-dye today. But today's class, we are going to be focusing on soil, fertilizing, pH, soil testing, all of those things, which is a good thing to know about so that you could set your plans up, right? But to start out, let me introduce myself again. My name is Ti, and I'm a avid gardener. I garden out here in Zone 7B. We are going to touch on zoning, maybe a little bit for this class as well, because I know some had stated before that they weren't sure about their zone. So I garden out here in Zone 7B. And this class was brought to you guys by Better Spaces, which encourages, good outside of work mental health classes. So make sure that you are following them on Eventbrite because they do put on a lot of good classes. So let's start out. I know last class we touched on the types of, I guess, things that we would use to hold in our soil, like if we're growing in raised beds or containers or just using different things to make the raised bed and hold in our container. And I wanted to touch on that a little bit before we get into the dirt versus soil conversation. So with the raised beds, there's a question of, how do I start filling up that raised bed? You'll realize that as you add more and more raised beds or container or anything, it will start getting expensive because there's different um, soil mediums that you'll need to add in each based on what is needed. Like for example, with containers, you need something that is well draining. So you wouldn't be able to put something like topsoil in containers because it's not as well draining. So my recommendation for containers is to go ahead and use potting mix. And the difference between potting mix, potting soil is that it's a more sterile medium. It has everything that gives your soil sometimes nutrition for up to 3 to 6 months. It will have the aeration with perlite and vermiculite, and then you'll have peat moss sometimes, and sometimes you'll see the potting soil will have pine bark, which will eventually break down and give your soil and your plants some nourishment. Versus if you go in the store, like the garden center, you'll see something like your raised bed mix. And well, let's first go back to topsoil. Topsoil is essentially like the name says, like the top portion of your soil. And this is not having as much nutrients, but it does have a bit of microbial activity. You'll find that it's mostly maybe sometimes if you get a really good topsoil, it'll have a good blend of clay and sand, but some of them it'll just have clay. So I would highly encourage that you look at the ingredients for anything that you're buying, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. So the topsoil, it may not have as good of drainage, but this is something that you could use to maybe fill a hole in your landscape or use it, just to add some type of soil out in the landscape where you're not really planting vegetables. Maybe you just want to grow perennials or trees. So it does have its benefits. They use it a lot whenever they're starting grass. You'll see that the landscape company use a lot of topsoil for that versus your raised bed mix. So the raised bed mix is a combination of your potting soil as well as your topsoil. So it will have the good drainage because more than likely they'll also have perlite in it. And you'll have some pine bark, which also helps with drainage because anytime you're creating pockets of space within the soil that will give drainage and good aeration. The difference too is maybe you are planting up a raised bed. You don't want to use potting soil because that's going to be way expensive to fill all your beds with that. So I would encourage you to go ahead and use your native soil and mix that with some compost and some maybe pine bark or sand, and just mix that all together to give you something that will be good for your plants but won't kill your pocket, right? But let's say now you have your raised beds and you have your garden, but around you, you also want to landscape, right? You want to grow some trees, you want to grow some perennials, and you don't want to create another raised bed in that area. So essentially, you'd have to be working with the soil that is in your property. So the main point of today is knowing what soil you are working with, or knowing what dirt you are working with. Because dirt, there's six components of dirt. There is clay, there's the loam, there's the silt, there's the sand, there's peat moss, and then there's the chalk, right? The three main ones that we normally see is clay, the sand, and also the silt. So these are things that you will most likely encounter when you go in your backyard. I would suggest that if you're unsure of which one you have, a easy way to test that is what's called the squeeze test. So you'll get a handful of dirt and you'll squeeze it between your hands, between your fists for a bit. If it stays together, more than likely you have clay soil. If it stays together for a second and then falls apart, more than likely you have silt or loam soil. And then if it doesn't stay together at all, more than likely you have sandy soil. So each of these components have different ways to make it into a loam soil. So what you're picking up at the store in the potting mix would be considered loam soil. So it's nice and light. It has the best drainage, properly aerated, no clumping and things like that. This is what you're trying to get your native soil to become, right? So like I said, last video, we were talking about the clay soil. And the thing with the clay soil is it does have some wonderful microbes, like you'll see worms and things like that. But the issue with clay soil is that it will clump together, which makes it really hard for roots to stretch out and really grow. And it'll also hold on to water a lot, right? So you'll notice when it rains, you'll see a puddle that stays there for a while. The drainage is an issue, which is why I said last time, if you have clay soil, it's good to then mix it with sand, right? Because sand is has no issue with drainage, versus if you have sand, what you want to do is get some compost and cow manure, like those heavier things. That way they could start being able to hold on to the water a lot. So when you have the potting soil and the raised bed soil in your raised beds, what you'll notice though is the loomier the soil, the faster the water dissipates. So you'll end up having to water it a lot more. So tend to I have clay soil, and even though it said that the loamy soil is what you're aiming towards, I tend to keep more of my clay in there, especially because I'm hand watering a lot of everything. I like to have that clay in there so that it holds onto that moisture. The only issue that you have to be careful about is when you're having a medium that is mostly clay, because it holds onto the water, you can and tend to overwater, right? Because it's holding on to the water. You're thinking that it needs more water. But if you put your hands down, there's a clump of water still not not getting out of the soil. So everything has its, ups and downs, and it's really personal preference, and sometimes it's really depending on what you decide to plant. I always say try to work with what you have there. It's good to be familiar. It's good to know whether your sand, your um, what's it called? Whether what you have in your yard is more clay or sand, because what's going to happen is if you're not familiar with it, you're just going to end up bringing in a lot of things from the garden center, or maybe you purchase a whole bunch of stuff from a landscaping company and you're just going to be adding stuff unnecessarily. Versus if you know what you're working with in the beginning, you could add the right components and spend less money. So I always recommend, it doesn't matter what type of soil you have, just go ahead and always add some compost, because that's going to add microorganisms. It's going to um, nourish whatever is already there, versus just bringing in anything willy-nilly that's not going to help build back your soil and help whatever is in your soil already to continue to produce and continue that nutrient cycle that will be good for your plant. So after the soil, I'm going to give you guys a second if you have any questions, because I know that was a lot of information. So I'm going to give you guys, as I said in the last class, if you want to, during any point where I ask a question, during any point where I ask you if you have a question, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's completely fine. You could raise your hand in the chat to indicate that you want to ask a question, or you could type out a question and I will answer it. Okay, so I wanted to share with you guys some things. So I'm going to share my screen for a bit. Oh, one second. Karen says, for raised beds, do you always use liner or some type before putting in soil? So I do not use a liner. Like I said, I really want to incorporate what I already have, which is the clay soil, with whatever else I'm adding to my bed. So what I did was whatever area I was planting, I took off the grass. I used a fork and I forked it up a bit, almost as if you were turning your soil. I forgot what those machines are called, but it's almost, oh, tilling. It's almost like if you're tilling, but I just used a fork and I dug deep into that. And then I added cow manure and I added sand. And I just kind of worked it all together because I really wanted that component of the clay that allows that water retention. Because, like I said, I'm hand watering all of my garden. So, having that clay in there to hold on to some water is really helpful. Okay, let's see. Hold on. Okay, one second. Let me just make sure I can still see the chat. Okay, you're welcome, Karen. All right. So we want to show you one of my top soil to use. This is Coast of Maine. I highly recommend that you go to your local nursery in order to purchase it. It is on the more of the expensive side. My more budget-friendly option is the Vogaro brand from Home Depot. That works fantastic. It's actually been tested. I don't know if you guys watch I can't remember the name of his channel, but he did a test of a bunch of potting soil, and Vogaro was in the top for nutrients and having good plant growth. But Coast of Maine, what I want to show you guys here, and if you guys have done like any health and nutrition class, I did health and nutrition in high school. And something that I've always taken away from that class is that the ingredients that are listed first And second, that's what's the main components in whatever you're buying, right? Same thing applies for potting mix. So if you notice here, it says the ingredients is spugnum peat moss. Then we have some composted manure. Then we have perlite, aged bark, and fertilizer, right? So when you're looking for a good potting mix, you don't want things like the aged bark being number one or number two, right? Because you're just going to end up with a bag filled with bark, and that's not good for potting. So having a um, moderate amount is good, but whenever you see it as the second ingredient, that's not something that you want to have in your container. It's going to be too heavy. That will be something that you want in your raised bed, right? So some things may be labeled potting soil, but if you look at the ingredients, it is not conducive to the proper potting soil or the ingredients that you really want. And then for topsoil, I have not personally used topsoil. Like I said, I just use what I have here, which is the clay. But a good brand for topsoil is the Bacto brand. I haven't used it, but I've heard really good things about it. It has a good mixture of the clay and the sand versus there's a lot of topsoils that is just mostly clay, which is too heavy. You really need to mix clay with something else. So I want to recommend that. And then if you want to do soil testing, I would recommend type in your whatever area you are at and put in local extension. And they do offer free soil testing. They'll give you something to fill out and you will essentially mail your soil sample to them, and they will come back and give you the components of your soil, like the NP and K and the pH. So here you'll do soil tests kits. This is Rutgers one. This is the one that's local for me, and they'll instruct you to get different samples from around your property, mix that all together, put it in a Ziploc, and then you'll mail it out to them. And they'll have a questionnaire that looks like this, where you'll fill out your name. You could select soil fertility, topsoil evaluation, lead, a whole bunch of things. And then you could also, they'll have you select what you're wanting to do with that area. Is it for lawn? Is it for shrubs, small tree, large tree, flowers, home garden crops, things like that. So that way, when they come back with your soil sample and give you that evaluation, they can make sure that it is more geared towards what you're trying to do with that area. So that is a good resource. Another fantastic resource is here we have, well, let's use this one. There's the Soil Web Survey. This is a little bit more harder to use, but they also have Soil Web, and this is also a app that you could use on your phone where you could actually put in your address or give them access to your location. And they've actually have a database of all of the soils, right? Let me get out and then I could show you. Let's see. So let's put Paramus, New Jersey, or you could put in your complete address. So let's select right there, right? And then if you look on the, if you look on the left side of the screen, you'll see the components, right, of this specific location. I just selected a random house and it says 55% Dunellen, 30% urban land. Then it has lower percentage of other things, right? When you get this, you're gonna click on the different components. And what it's gonna tell you, you click organic matter, And basically, what it's showing you is based on the depth, how great is the percentage of organic matter. So if you see, if you look towards here, it says, okay, if you keep going down to, I would say this is about 10 to 15 or yeah, this is where most of your organic matter is. And then after that, it kind of drops off, right? And then for clay, it shows that it's about 10% clay all the way down. For sand, as you go further down, you're getting more and more sand. And the other part is it's showing you your pH, right? So it's saying as you go down, maybe to 70 or so, your pH is 5. And then when you go down more, it's 6. And usually plants like a pH of around, I would say 6.8 or so. But it definitely does vary. If you are planting something like blueberries that needs a more acidic soil, you'll use something like a soil acidifier. Espoma, I use this from Espoma, and it works really well. It also works if you want to change the color of your hydrangeas, if you have hydrangeas. And I believe Hollytone also have a little bit of acidity in their fertilizer, so you could use that as well. If you need a soil that's more alkaline, this is where you'd go ahead and use Garden Tone, and that allows you to go ahead and make your soil a little bit more alkaline. Let me get out of here for you guys. So that, hold on one second, guys. Yeah, so that was a big thing for me because I always just, and I still want you to go ahead and support your, local um, thing, but this website was really, really helpful. And I'm going to also put it in the chat. Give me 1 second so I could put it in there for you because it was really helpful. And like I say, you can also use it on the phone. The app is called Soil Web. Let me double check for you guys. Yeah, the app is called Soil Web. And you could use this to essentially figure out what is going on with your soil around you. So that is major, major because you essentially don't have to do anything but go on the website or pick up your phone. You don't have to get the samples if you don't want to. I would say the samples are still super beneficial if you want to maybe plant a big hedge of something and you want to make it ideal for that plant, I would go ahead and use the soil sample so that it's specific to whatever you're planting. But other than that, I would use that website. It was put together by UC Davis in California, and it's really, like I said, really beneficial, and it helps you kind of work through what's going on. Whenever you click on the different classifications of how much percentage, it can get a little bit scientific and, seems a lot. But what you're trying to look for whenever you click on those is look for well draining, just key terms like that. If it's not simplified enough there, you could always just take it out and Google it and ask for a simplified explanation of what that is. But that is pretty much everything for this class. If you guys have any questions, this would be a good time. I'm going to quickly look over because I did do a lot of notes for this and I just want to make sure that I touched on everything. Oh, for whenever you're purchasing the, let's say, fertilizers. I almost forgot about fertilizers. Okay, fertilizers. So there's different types of fertilizers. You have your organic fertilizers and you have your synthetic fertilizers. So I like to think of organic fertilizers as you are there trying to build up your plant, but also the soil ecosystem. Whereas the synthetic fertilizers, they're just there to feed the plant. So a lot of times people use both. Like for me, I will have both the synthetic and organic fertilizer, and I only use the synthetic fertilizer in my containers where I'm just planting flowers. I don't use synthetic fertilizers for anything that I'm eating. I like to stick to the organic fertilizers, and they work just as well. The organic fertilizers is usually made from organic plant matter, just things that are natural and broken down. The thing with the organic, though, because the NP and K is lower, you'll see changes a little bit slower than you'll see for the synthetic fertilizers. So they'll usually have a higher NPK. The NPK, tell us which type of marigold. Okay, yeah, let me hit on that. The NPK, the N is the nitrogen, the P is the phosphorus, and the K is potassium. So think of it as the N is up, so the leafy growth. So whenever you're trying to, let's say you plant out something and it's looking a little yellow, right then and there, you're going to be trying to fix the amount of nitrogen that it's receiving. So nitrogen is for the leafy growth. The P for phosphorus is for, you'll think down. So that's more for the roots. So if you're planting a root vegetable, you'll more likely try to get something that has a higher P so that it promotes better and stronger root growth. And then the potassium is just all around, right? Just covers everything, flowering, all of that good stuff. Michelle said, hello, in the last session, you mentioned you could tell us which type of marigold is best to keep pests away, that some are better than others. Yes, you want to stick to the French marigold. There's another specific type that can be a little bit better than the French marigold. I'm going to have to get that name for you, but I know the French marigold is what is usually recommended, and it's not as much keep them away. Sometimes it's just a little bit of a deterrence because of the intense smell. So it's not foul proof, but it is really helpful. Do you know of a good website? You're welcome. That shows how much soil you need to grow different vegetables. Okay, so if you're doing, are you asking if you're doing it in a container? Because if you're talking about container gardening, you can search different. I had a chart that had that information, but you can find it just by Googling um, the specific plant that you're trying to plant or grow, and they will tell you how much of a large container, how much gallons you'll need in order for that plant to be satisfied and grow to its full potential. You're welcome. If you guys, hold on. Lady Glenn, do you have a question? Okay. Okay, guys, so I think I've touched on everything. I put my email in the chat. If you have any questions about anything, you can reach out to me. Today was a off time as far as my normal classes is normally on Thursdays at 1, but to celebrate Earth Day, I wanted to do a class with talking about the soil and all of that good stuff. So the next class will be in 2 more weeks, and it will be on Thursday at 1. So back to the regular schedule. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you guys don't have any more questions, I'm going to end it. Okay. Bye, guys. Oh, one message. Have a nice day. You too. Thank you.